There are a bunch of other fun ways I would like to start this episode off. We'll have a listener submission story later, and even that story reminded me of so many of my own wild nights that I could have kicked this intro off with. But I can't. I have to talk about Sonya Massey. I want to tell you about her, and I have faith that you'll listen. Sonya Massey was 36 years old, and she was shot and killed in Woodside Township, Illinois on June 6, 2024. But Rocky, surely she must have killed someone to have been killed. Surely she must have attacked a police officer. She must have been in a high-speed chase with Joe Biden himself being held hostage. No. Sonya was in her home on that Saturday night. She called the police because she thought there was an intruder and she was scared. Sonya was a mother of two. A little boy and a little girl, 17 and 15. Before we get into the details, I just want you to know that this is someone whose family spoke so highly of her. She didn't deserve to be killed this way, even if her family didn't speak highly of her, but I think that just invites you into the gentle warmness that was Sonya Massey, if you didn't know that already. You can't pick your family, so if you have one that says nice things about you when you aren't in the room, then you're doing something right. The cop, however, who shot her was discharged from the Army for misconduct. He was charged with driving under the influence of alcohol, and that was just one of his DWI charges. That's gonna ruin the tour for sure, Deputy. Sonya was speaking to the two officers outside her front door, and to be all the way real with you, they were not comforting at all. This is a citizen who they're meant to serve and protect, who thinks that someone is trying to break into her home. And the cops are like, well, I checked the back of the house and no one's there and blah, 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 no one's trying to break in. No comfort whatsoever, no humanity whatsoever. Then they get inside and she's sitting on her couch and they ask her for her ID. Seems irrelevant in the moment, but whatever. They tell her it would make it easier for them if they had that. She can't find her ID, so the cops suggest she checks a pile of papers in the kitchen area. She gets up, and she happened to have a pot boiling on the stove, and they ask her, get away from the pot. I guess he was already lining up the excuse that he was scared she'd throw the pot at him and to set his story up nice for the future. I don't know. She seems confused when he mentions her getting away from the pot. I would be too. I would think only an unstable person would assume a person standing next to a pot of boiling water was going to throw it at them. As the cop begins to escalate the situation, Sonya says the sentence, "I rebuke you in the name of Jesus," twice. This is where I cut the video off because I refuse to watch another black person be murdered on film by police. Personal preference of mine. I feel like something in Sonya knew this was pure evil in her home. She didn't say the sentence over the top or dramatic. It was almost matter of fact. I rebuke you in the name of Jesus. Sonya was talked about as loving God and a woman of faith. So when I heard that, it sent shivers down my spine. Because I believe that she knew she was sharing the room with pure evil in that moment. When she picked up the pot to put in the sink after saying, "I'm just kidding," with the rebuke stuff, the officer, Sean Grayson, shot her in the head and murdered her in her kitchen. That's what happened. And I know 4+ years have gone by since Breonna Taylor was murdered in her home. Since George Floyd's murder was broadcasted for the entire world to see what these officers do. And American citizens had so much more time on their hands because they were homebound from COVID. And people who were not aware of the epidemic of police essentially hunting black people with zero to no consequences or repercussions suddenly got woke. They marched, they donated, and they posted, and for a second it felt like this could never happen again. Not on our watch. But my friends, it is still happening. A mother called for help, and the people whose job it is to help, who yours, mine, and ours tax dollars become their salaries, who signed up to serve and protect, murdered her in her home because she was black. It is still happening. They are still murdering in plain sight. Unnecessary trauma and pain for her family, for her community, for families who are reliving their own loss and trauma all over again after hearing about this incident. And for all of us trying to live as an American, feeling the ripples of pain from our country and our losses. Sonya deserves to be here today, along with the hundreds of other Black lives lost to police officers in America. So while you may not have the free time you had back in 2020 to feel that outrage, maybe you don't have the money to donate. Maybe you don't have the time to march. And maybe you have the luxury to scroll past or click to the next story living in your own la 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 land. But maybe you could take a moment to say her name.
It's time for
Duh.
Rocket
Welcome to the Rocky Rundown, where you get to learn a little bit about my week. Party God Squad, hello! Did you have a good week? I hope your week felt like an Olympic athlete winning the gold in Paris, baby. I feel like when they win a gold medal, their internal monologue must be like, I'm peaking right now! That's what mine would be like. And did you ever think about how many moves and things our bodies can endure? That's what's happening with these athletes in the Olympics. Think about it. Can you imagine right now just doing a backflip and letting anyone talk about anything else? I'd never shut up. The second someone tried to change the subject, I'd be sticking the landing all over again. And you expect these Olympic athletes, these gods among us, to come back and be humble? They're snowboarding down the Eiffel Tower in July for our amusement while Snoop Dogg raps gin and juice with a French accent. Yeah, you can get your meal comped at Nobu when you get back to the States, Steph Curry. I'm gonna let you merge on the highway, Ashley Johnson. Hey, Simone Biles, maybe Verizon just covers your family plan for, I don't know, the rest of your life. I feel like I should carve out some time to watch the Olympics because it seems to be a huge deal for a while now, years even. But the last time I watched it, it was a lot of camera work on the audience, specifically Michaela Maroney's parents. And I have to say, I get the angle. You got the camera on the athletes, and what do you see? You see composure, you see concentration, peak nerves, real emotion, but not a lot of dramatics. The athletes are very stoic. Watching the loved ones of the athletes, however, is like watching great reality TV mixed with a great underdog sports movie drama at the same time. You can't beat it. So you know, if you put the Olympics on and they aren't really showing the loved ones in the crowd, and it's just the athletes, how are we supposed to care if we can't also see the crowd care? I don't know. I'll try. Speaking of leaving the country for a wild athletic adventure, boy, oh boy, have I got a story for you. Hopefully you're all caught up with last week's episode featuring a story from one of the hosts of the podcast Last Two Brain Cells, Donovan. This week, I'm featuring a story from Austin, the other half of the Last Two Brain Cells. If you haven't listened to that story, listen after this or pause and come back. You pick your poison, but I want you to hear both stories. One other thing I'd like to do is I'd like to give a viewer and listener discretion. Austin and Donovan do that for their shows. It's in case anyone who's not of age makes their way to the pod, and I just think that's great. You can't always stop kids from exploring the internet, but god damn it, if you can try, then you gotta try. So kids, now would be a most excellent time to turn off the pod and try again in 15 years. Now that we got rid of them, let's get into the story. Let's get into the debauchery. Austin is the star of this story, joined by Donovan, who we know and love, and another friend named Austin. Not only is our Austin from Austin, he can also only be friends with people named Austin besides Donovan. Surprisingly enough, this story does not take place in Austin, though you thought it might. It takes place in Medellin, Colombia. Medellin. It sounds so sexy. All I know about Medellin is that on Entourage, Vincent Chase played Pablo Escobar in a movie called Medellin, and I believe it tanked his career in the plotline. Gotta do a rewatch. Austin's flying down to Medellin, but his buddies Donovan and other Austin are riding motorcycles from Texas all the way down to Colombia. I'll take things two women could never do on their own without being murdered for $400. The guys were having a 10-day trip down there, and this trip was going to be full of adventure. On about day 5, the fellas decide to go on a rooftop bar of their hostel. That is so fun. I've stayed in hostels before, and guess what? They were a little gross. The pool of one of them was actually green, and once someone broke into my room while I was sleeping. I wasn't sleeping because the keys were all the same and he was drunk. And thank God I wasn't sleeping and I was up listening to Armchair Expert, if you can believe. And thank God all the guy was looking for was his own bed because he scampered off. I say this because, boys, good for you for finding a good hostel out there. A fun hostel. It's never been my story. A rooftop bar? What are you, in a 70s movie? Go off. The views of the city were amazing from the rooftop bar at the hostel. The people around them were cool, but it happened to be King's Day. If I'm not mistaken, King's Day is also January 6th, so kudos to you boys for getting out of the country. The only problem is they're sticking out like sore thumbs. King's Day, people go all out. They got crowns on, flashy outfits. Once again, our guys didn't get the memo and are sticking out at a party. Classic. Never an issue for them, though. And I gotta give it to them because they do find allies out in the wild. They want to make the most of the night. And I learned that Austin is a streamer, so he suggests they start streaming their night. Pretty cool. An amazing service you must have had down there, Austin. Very impressed. They all make their way to a second rooftop hostel. Okay. Maybe you're selling me on hostels in Colombia because a second rooftop bar in walking distance? At this hostel bar, they run into 3 soon-to-be friends, 2 tourists like them, and 1 local gal. And these 3 are chomping on Molly like their lives depend on it. And I quote, popping Molly like Tic Tacs. Looks like they found the fun people. This becomes who they hang out with for the night. They aren't even looking to do drugs with them. They're simply enjoying the vibes and wanting to ride that wave. They're high on new friendship and beer. One of the guys of the 3 new people won't stop talking about this incredible hamburger he just ate. Honestly, thinking about someone loving a hamburger makes me want one. That is a fantasy I'm currently experiencing. And you know he's not lying, because the good and bad part about people who are wasted is they're usually not lying. Of course, they decide to see for themselves what the hype is about surrounding this hamburger. Drum roll, please. Austin says it was great. Now, 2 weeks of story dropping with these guys, we know that they are up for adventure. But maybe in 2 different ways tonight, because Austin is ready to stay out with his new pals and rage, and Donovan wants to go to bed because at 5 a.m., they have an epic, and I do mean epic, hike that they're all looking forward to. So they split. Austin stays up with his new Molly homies, and they're laughing. This is Colombia, so we'll keep it a buck. The Molly homies have turned into cocaine cronies. Austin is rolling up the J's, and he doesn't partake in a ski down Medellin mountain, if you catch my drift. He's got heart problems, and he's got to keep himself safe. That doesn't mean he isn't down to clown and hang at the slopes. And as the night goes on, they run out of cocaine. And they run out of weed to smoke. But this is Colombia. Shouldn't be too hard to score. Austin is thinking at this point they can just make a call, meet someone downstairs, give them $20, and come back to their lap of luxury rooftop hostel and keep the party going. But oh baby, was he wrong about that. They get downstairs, and as soon as they get downstairs, there's an Uber waiting for them. The 2 tourists get in asking no questions, and Austin is standing there, having to make a very hard decision. am I getting in this Uber in Colombia at this hour to go on a drug run essentially with 3 strangers for drugs I'm not going to do the night before a huge hike, and no one I'm here on this trip with knows where I'm at in this moment? It was at that second that the local girl in the group extends her hand for him to hold. Don't worry, you're gonna be okay. At this point, while I'm listening to Austin's submission of the story, I hear Donovan let out this hilarious laugh in the background. It was a laugh of a lived-in vacation moment that assured me these 2 guys, well, they're going to be laughing about this trip for the rest of their lives. I loved it so much. It was so pure. Austin decides to trust the local girl and throw caution to the wind. He takes her hand and he gets in the Uber. Then, as they're driving, the street lights start to become more sparse. The streets get, as he described, scary movie dark. Uh-oh. It was getting so dark that when he looked out the window, you couldn't even see down the alleyways. Hey, no thanks. I prefer my streets abroad to be well lit and not well lit. Okay? Well lit. If you're ever in a foreign country and they have a power outage, ooh, baby, you better bargain for some generators because things can turn Walking Dead real quick. They get to a specific corner that was positively pitch black, and the car gets surrounded by men. Another thing I'll pass on, thanks. And these men are yelling out different drug names. Austin is not a drug doer by any means, but he's not a square, and he knows the names of a lot of drugs. And these men surrounding the car were yelling out things he ain't never heard before. He said it was the Cheesecake Factory menu of drugs. And this is a sidebar, but while we're on the subject of the Cheesecake Factory, if people want to go there on their first date, let them, and shut the fuck up. You're someone weighing in online on what people should do for a first date and shaming people from behind a phone or computer. Get a hobby or masturbate, but stop shaming people for figuring out how they want to do their life. If someone wanted to take me to the Cheesecake Factory right now, I'd say, maybe another time. But I wouldn't shit on them for asking. The men are surrounding the car, yelling out some old classics in the drug category, and also dropping some new singles no one's ever heard of. Austin's still holding hands with the local gal, and the guy in the front seat, Mr. Hamburger, well, he says, "Cocaine for the table, my good man." It's at that moment all the men surrounding the car scatter. And one man comes back with a sack of snow. They do the money exchange, and they're on their way back to the deluxe hostel in the sky. Can we also just take a moment to acknowledge their Uber driver who kept the car running this whole time and didn't make them get out and call another Uber in no man's land? That's gangsta as shit. My Uber driver yelled at me a few mornings ago because he said I made him wait in the busy intersection too long. Next time, be downstairs because I'm gonna get a ticket. Sir, respectfully, next time, in the universe where I'm repeating Uber drivers, or better yet, have one on retainer, it sure as shit isn't going to be the guy who can't wish me a happy Tuesday upon entering the vehicle, okay? There will be no next time. That guy wouldn't last a day driving in Colombia. It's about 2 or 3 a.m. at this point. Austin still has to be up at 5 a.m. for the hike. But they go back to hostel number 2, not Austin's OG hostel. So when they get back and he's got to say his goodbyes, he still has to walk back to his place. And as he's walking back, there is no one out. He's walking in the middle of the street, and all of a sudden he hears, "Hello? Hello? Are you going to the party? Are you going to the parade?" 2 women on the street who are dressed for King's Day lure him to another hostel. He knew he shouldn't have gone back, but his primal instincts kicked in, and he wanted to party. I can't blame him. The next party, though, was a bit of a different vibe. He's sitting with the 2 gals from outside and some new hostel characters. And a guy bursts in the room they're chilling in and starts going on and on about how the vaccine has killed more people than COVID ever has. A word to the wise. Nobody ever loves the does their own research for the hang kind of person. And this guy was really harshing the mellow. Austin, who's not a confrontational person, has had it up to here with this guy by this point. And he says, honestly, bro, you're being a bitch and no one is enjoying hanging out with you. You tell him, Austin. And we all know once you snap at the annoying conspiracy theory guy at the party, it's probably time to saddle up and go home. He makes it back to his hostel. The sun is coming up. He's doing what he can do not to wake up Donovan, but Donovan's already got 7 or 8 hours sleep at this point. So he starts to stir, thinking it's time to get up. It's not time to get up just yet, Donovan, but it will be in 45 minutes. Uh-oh, Austin. 45 minutes. So Austin takes advantage of that 45 minutes and he falls asleep. And he wakes up at 5 a.m. still drunk. His head is spinning. He's absolutely miserable, not prepared for this hike at all. The guys get on a bus. I want you to picture a coach bus with luxury seating, AC, reclining seats, driving on flatlands for 30 minutes. This was not that. This bus was not luxury, and it was driven by a speed demon driving on cliffs who had no regard for motorcyclists, apparently, or anyone sharing the road with him for that matter. And they're on the bus for 4 to 5 hours to get to this mountain. Austin feels like shit. His face starts to tingle. He realizes he's about to have a panic attack. And there was nothing he could do about it. They couldn't stop the bus. And even if they did, they were in the middle of nowhere. He tells Donovan what's going on and how he's feeling. And Donovan suggests he starts doing some box breathing. And by God, it worked. He still felt like shit, but it worked. When they got to the mountain they were hiking, they described it as zigzag stairs on the side of a cliff. His pals kept him motivated, and even though this was one of the most physically hellish experiences of Austin's life, he made it to the top. He let out a sigh and he had no regrets. Donovan and Austin have been friends for 16 years, and Donovan's been through some of the gnarliest times with Austin. But he admits that this one was truly one of the wildest. He was super proud of his friend for making it to the top. And Austin was super grateful that he had his friends who had his back all the way to the top. Another reason to check out the last two Brain Cells podcast. These two are rooted in history together. Donovan and Austin, it has been such a pleasure to retell your stories for the last 2 weeks. And if you'd like to submit a Wild Night story to be retold on the show, you can email me at wildnightswithrocky@gmail.com. If you haven't done so already, please like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You can follow me at Wild Nights with Rocky on TikTok and Instagram, at Wild Nights Pod on Twitter. If you want to watch the show with your eyes, you can subscribe on YouTube. Feel free to join my Patreon and support the show for $2 or $5 a month. A big thank you and a future thank you to everyone who's written and everyone who will write a review on this show when the episode is over. It really does make a difference. And until next time, stay wild.
It's a